Welcome to Tailor Made Chaos. On this podcast, we'll bring you some of the highest flyers and most interesting people in and around the fitness industry. We'll talk and laugh with CEOs, franchisee groups, exercise specialists, and to those who work in sales and marketing, and will share their insights and knowledge of all things related to the business of fitness. Love what you hear? Make sure you like and subscribe to keep up to date. On with today's show, proudly brought to you in conjunction with Fit Into Shape, a small but dedicated team of fitness industry professionals, delivering on all of your fitness equipment and gym design needs.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome to another episode of Tailor Made Chaos. This time we have truly gone international. We are sitting here in Baltimore, in Virginia, I think I was told by the cameraman this morning. I think I was off, but I thought we were in Maryland. But regardless, we are here, we're international, and this morning's guest is actually one of the favorite people I listen to on podcast. Their own podcast, Everyone Has a Spotter. Steve is kind of the voice of the show, but it's these awkward and quiet silences and the putting on the spot that makes Robert Decker, the man who I'm speaking with here, one of my favorite podcasters. So welcome to the show, Robert.
Thank you, Glenn.
So Robert, obviously we are on the opposite side of the world from where I come from.
Yes, we are.
Hopefully you're understanding what I'm saying. Whilst we both supposedly speak English, we do it a little bit differently down under than what you do.
Yes, sir, you do.
So Robert, I'm going to take a wild punt that most of the people, all three, who listen to my podcast probably don't know who you are. So for those who are listening, in a nutshell, who's Robert Decker? Not
Right.
in a nutshell, but...
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm a simple guy. I'm a family man who has found a love for what I do, which is, you hear about that so much. Motivational speakers speak about that so much. I'm a man who grew up simple means to the point that now I'm able to provide for my family, enjoy the industry that I'm in. The challenges are there. We talk about that a lot. But for the most part, Robert Decker is a man who is able to come to work, loves what he does, has the opportunity to hopefully, in the very near future, who knows, pass this business on to the people that I care about. And that the what I have done over the years will continue in the future. So for the most part, again, it's a simple intro, but that's who I am. I'm just a family man who has had the opportunity to create a business in which I can sustain that lifestyle.
Wonderful. So we're going to dig a bit deeper into all of that, but the business is not obviously Everyone Has a Spotter.
Right.
Podcasts don't pay for most people unless you're super successful.
So
what's the business that you work in, Robert?
Well, in the name, RMS, we repair, maintain, and sell fitness equipment. And we do it here on the Eastern Seaboard in the United States. We cover the state of Maryland, Virginia, Delaware. So if I could go back a little bit, the R is really where it began in the repair industry, and that's what I did. And then we began to maintain our clients, and now, within the progression of the RMS world, we began selling equipment. So RMS Fitness is that. We repair, maintain, and sell fitness equipment.
Now, a little birdie told me yesterday that the RMS, and that little birdie happened to be yourself, Robert.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
We're not going to play like there was some sort of mystery here. But what did RMS originally stand for?
It was as simple, again, talking about a simple guy here, was Robert's Multi-Services.
Right. Well, I'm sure we're going to cover some of that in the history. But
Yes.
Robert, let's get back to the start. Where did you grow up? Where did little Robert Decker begin his place on this earth?
All right. So that began in the city of Baltimore. My parents, being an only child, I grew up in a good home, but we had very little means. So my father worked a couple of jobs, my mother worked. So we lived in the 70s. Things were very difficult in this area, in this country. And so what I was able to do as a child was very limited as far as, the clothes on my back or the food that we were given. So I grew up in in an environment where we couldn't take things for granted. Everything that we had to take care of, because we just couldn't just buy, like today, the throwaway society we live in now. Everything we had from home to automobile, we had to take care of. And my father taught me that the value of what you have and to take care of it. Food was not something I could also, we had to finish everything on the plate, even if it was liver, which is not something I enjoy. But, as a child, I learned that, what you have today, you have to be thankful for. And so, again, being in that less than privileged time of my life, I had to work very hard to get what I needed to do. And schooling was the same way. Grew up in city schools and very difficult world.
Yep.
Everything was a challenge. As I got older, sports were my thing. I don't even know if we talked about that, but I played a lot of sports as a young man.
Yeah. So what sport were you into?
I could throw a ball. So I played the three main sports that this area covered, which was baseball, football, and basketball. So they just rotated. Football in the winter. In the spring, it was, a little bit of basketball, and then right into baseball, and then I might play a little more basketball in the fall. And then when I get into high school, I was into, those kinds of organized sports within the high school. And maybe could have done a little more. Life would only know, but again, I didn't have the means, and my father worked all the time. So there wasn't that manly presence that pushed me to do more in that environment in sports. But I always enjoyed being in the gym, working out especially football season, you had to bulk up. Our school was small, so we were small. I probably played linebacker at 180 pounds, so I was, a senior in high school, that's light. Most of the guys were 200 plus on the other side of the line. But I enjoyed the game, and, I took that organized way of doing things, teamwork, and I've kind of just enjoyed that so much that I sometimes feel like I'm here coaching as opposed to being the owner.
Yep.
and trying to help the team on. So yeah, that's kind of my upbringing. And then along the way, I had multiple jobs. I think I told you, the job market was tough for a while here in the States.
So probably before we get into the sort of job market and stuff, at school, were you academic, sporting, or a bit of both?
It's funny. I was good at math, so I like numbers. But if you asked me to read a book, you probably hit a brick wall. Let's be honest. It wasn't what I enjoyed doing.
Yep.
I was more of the science and math guy, academically speaking. But sports. Again, I think I probably would have been more engaged with the sports if I'd have had the support for it. But, it's funny how they talk about traveling leagues now. So the reason I didn't progress in the baseball is because my family didn't have the money in order for me to travel with the other kids into the traveling. So there were those limitations. So again, looking back, still enjoyed what I did, but there were definitely some limitations.
Yeah, look, financial means obviously changes things. So I'm guessing you started working at a pretty young age.
Yeah. First job at 14.
Yeah, what was that?
Let's think about that for a second. Well, it definitely isn't the reason I'm here today. I was working at a pizza shop.
Yeah.
Flipping pizzas. And
nice.
I did enjoy some pizzas back in the day. So yeah, I worked there for a few years.
Yep.
And it's funny when I'm not necessarily sure we need to explain what I was making back then, but yeah, it was definitely worked in the sub shop to get me started part-time. Again, that was the only way, if I was going to get a car at that age, I had to start working, and I had to work multiple jobs. So I did that, and then I did some grass cutting and other things to supplement that. But yeah, if I wanted something, I had to go out there and earn it.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I think you and I have a similar background in that respect. So, fast forwarding, you finished school.
Yep.
You didn't go on to college or university or the like. You went into the workforce.
I did. I went into the workforce. However, I did spend 6 months at the university.
Okay.
I did go to college. That's what my parents wanted me to do.
Yep.
First one in the family to get to college. So I did get to, so academically, I did get into college.
Yep. And it wasn't a scholarship for
No,
sport or anything?
it wasn't a scholarship at the time. And again, I think that had to do with not being focused as a young man, because there were things, again, without a father, he was a provider, but he wasn't the guy who gave me advice because he was never quite around at the time.
Yeah.
So I was trying to figure things out as a young man. So what seemed to be fun wasn't exactly, and there's a lot of stories out there. Fun for me was a distraction because I didn't think about down the road what the next 10 years would mean. I was thinking about that moment at that time. So yes, I went into the workforce, and I got into the workforce in retail. I think I told you it was in the automotive retail. And I got in because I liked cars. I worked on cars. So I enjoyed that industry a great deal. But it also meant that I was making money as a young man in management in retail that I didn't see the need to go to school.
Got it.
You know what I'm saying? So it was kind of a like, I don't know. Was it a good decision? That's a good question. But I went off and did that, and it gave me some skills, people skills, looking at the industry and how it, was set up at that time and what it meant to work with my hands and with people. So I do think that I drew a lot from that time period, because that would have meant that I was managing the automotive department for that retailer at the age of 19.
Okay.
So, I was excelling in that area. And then from there, again, the job market took a little turn. And I think I told you I went into sales of actual automobiles. So I was a salesman for automobiles. So I got a little bit of that exposure. And then lo and behold, I took my automotive experience and kept growing on it. So from job to job, just trying to, if this job didn't have the full potential I thought it could have for me at the time, I'd move on to someone else.
Yeah. And I think you said there was an area there where you're doing videography or filming. So tell us a bit about that.
It's funny here. So I'm talking automotive 1 minute. So I go off into the photography side because I had this thing again with people, and I decided that a friend of mine had shown me the artwork of photography, and I was kind of swept in. I was like, oh, okay. So we did a few shoots together, and he was showing me landscapes and things like that, and I thought, okay, this is nice. And then maybe this was the very first time that I thought, I could do a business into this.
Gotcha.
And that's when I decided that I was going to go off and do the wedding photography and videography at the time, and we did it for 10 years.
Okay.
But again, short-lived in that sense, because I had to make another decision. As I told you, my family, because at that point I was, in my 20s, worked that 10 years. So I'm now in my early 30s, and now my wife says, hey, by the way, we're going to have a family. And then I was like, okay, so what's the next chapter? Because wedding photography for a family man would mean time away from the family on the weekends. So then I had to make a decision. Okay, it might be best for me to try and find something else. So what I didn't say in that segment with you is that I'm doing this business, but I've also already been clued in on the fitness business.
Okay.
So I've been clued in. Okay, there's also this business out there that some colleagues, friends were into, and I had thought about it, but I was already focused in on this, so I didn't take it seriously until this moment.
So where are we at in time? Around the early or mid 90s at this stage, yeah?
Yeah, well, actually, we'd have been mid 90s-ish area.
Yeah, so technology obviously wasn't what it was now. Everyone now thinks they're a videographer.
Right, exactly.
No
pun intended to the guy.
We got our cameraman having a laugh in the background. Anyone can be a videographer.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it.
But it used to take skill.
Yes. Not to mention, I remember the dark room. being in the dark room and doing film.
Yeah.
So that's how far back I go with that. But I probably in my photography days saw the transition from film to digital. So that dates me as well.
Yeah, well I'm assuming you used Kodak back then, which for some of the young kids may not remember what Kodak is.
That's true.
Yeah. So you kind of made a transition there.
Yes.
But it sounds like, you know, a couple of things from you know, your childhood that have come through was one, obviously the lack of means has spurred that entrepreneurial flair.
Yes.
And I think secondly, you know, you mentioned a couple of times your dad was a bit more of he was a provider, but he was a way dad.
Yes.
And it sounds like you really focused on that in your life and wanted to be there for your family. So how did then that focus change from photography to RMS and you know, where did RMS sort of go to from there?
Well, that's a good question, because at that point, I am focusing on, okay, how do I provide? Because I had been in the workforce and saw what it takes in order to provide for yourself in the workforce and how much you have to hustle for someone else. They never really see everything that you've given into whatever that job may be. And so I said, okay, so here's an opportunity for me where I can take this business of repairing fitness equipment, and now it's just a matter of hustling. And what better motivation for hustling than to provide for your family? You feel like, okay, if this is going to work out, then I need to give it my all. So I feel at that moment it was my internal motivation that I had someone else depending on me to be successful. So some people have that, maybe they can do it on their own, but for me, knowing I had others depending on that really gave me the opportunity to really ramp it up. So I think I shared with you, you know, I was out in the field. I'm dating myself again. I had the old flip phone. So I'm accepting phone calls from customers and I'm repairing. So I got the phone in one ear and I'm turning a wrench in the other. And I'm saying to myself, okay, so I can do this, but I can only do but so much as one person. So then I'm hiring on someone in the office. And then from there, I feel like, okay, I think I can manage someone else in the field, share my experience with someone else. So then I hired another technician, and then I hired another technician. And that just kept going and going and going. And I think I told you that the technician in this industry, the person that goes out and does this, we are a rare breed in the sense that it's not a glorified job at all. But if you really put your effort and your hard work into it, in my case, I was able to turn that into a means to provide for my family. And so looking back, having that motivation, man, it's hard to believe that it's been 29 years looking back.
Well, see, now you really are dating yourself. But so 29 years, obviously seen some massive changes in our industry. And I think we've kind of talked a little bit about what was known as the ma and pa operators to now the big multi-corporates. Talk to me about some of the changes, though, that you think have been maybe the biggest changes that we've seen in our industry over that last 28 years.
Well, I think it goes without saying it's the technology that you see in the facilities. It's not enough just to get on a treadmill and run your 5 miles or walk your 3 miles. People want to be engaged with something else besides just that, oh, I have to do 30 minutes today. They want more from it. So I think even from as a technician, who I've become and how I've had to adapt is mechanically, I told you I had the automotive experience. So to take a walking belt, a deck, an incline motor, those were just straight bolt-on. But now with the technology, now you have a totally separate dynamic of being able to program a computer, basically, software. You know, those weren't the things that I got to evolve into it. And the guys that I began this kind of industry with, they're all gone now because they couldn't keep up with it.
Yeah.
You know, they're the kind of individuals who would like as the market was going in that direction, they fought. Okay, they would tell that don't do that. It's like in this industry, it's about being adaptable.
Yeah.
If this is the way the industry, the consumer or the large gym wants to go, because it's interesting because you go into one large facility and there's technology everywhere.
Yep.
And then you go into the even maybe similar size and square footage, and they've decided not to do that.
Yeah.
And so there's, but they have two different clientele. But I go back to, without that change, I don't think the fitness industry would have maintained itself. And I'm also the guy that was there at the beginning of the pandemic when everything shut down. Everyone wanted technology. They wanted the bikes with the screens and the treadmills with the screens. And so that has been the biggest change in the industry to the way I see it.
Yeah.
Because even in the smaller multi-housing industry that we're in, you look at a situation where without technology, the appeal to the person, the resident that's going to, sign a lease, when they walk into a fitness center, what are they looking for? They're looking for the technology. Is this gym up to speed as far as those things are concerned? How modern is their fitness center?
Yeah.
So that's really been the change that I've seen.
Yeah, I think, you touch on an important point there, that how modern is it? I think, it used to be, and there's a brand that I'm not a big fan of, and I think we shared about it yesterday. But that brand, Technogym, what I credit them with is making everybody try and make equipment look better.
Oh yeah.
I think aesthetically, if you look at the early 2000s or the late 1990s when they sort of hit the market, as an Italian type of company, they turned products into more of a furniture appeal. Is my theory. They wanted to make it more aesthetically appealing, and they've evolved that with the technology. I credit them for a great lot of innovation there in that space. I think what you touch on is now it's an expectation that our facilities do have the latest and the most up to date, and it has to be visually appealing. And I think all the manufacturers have headed that way. But do you see a downside to that? Like, is there any negative that you've sort of seen as a result of that in our industry? A long-winded statement to get to a question there.
Well,
I think I'm Steve Heitzer the way I'm talking.
Oh, don't edit that out. That was pretty good. But I mean, there's two sides really for me. Like, if I approach a customer who's trying to impress and draw, so if you have a gym and they want to draw in, they want to get in as many members as possible and they want their members to have that experience, then they have to go in that direction. But then I'm also the guy who goes into these gyms after they've had set up, and now I'm explaining to them that the console on this treadmill cannot be simply just left alone. You have to, it's a computer. Yeah. Does it have its latest firmware? Does it have the latest software? And what happens is that, and this, as a manager of the club, you're bringing in members, how much time do you have to allot to, I have 15 treadmills, I need to spend time updating the consoles? You don't. But it's also maybe, I can't say this for sure, but I also wonder in the buying process if someone explains that to them, that, hey, what you're buying is going to require some attention in order to keep it up. Because if you get, and all of a sudden now the technician's kicking in, if you allow the software to fall too far behind, you can't upgrade it too quickly, or then you wind up, in a sense, the console, the term we use is brick.
Yep.
It won't accept the new software, and now you're out of console. So the expense for the repairs are pretty expensive.
Yeah, look, I think you've crossed into an interesting divide there that our industry has seen for a long time. And, you know, a lot of the bigger companies, there's this real division between sales and service. And a lot of the companies sort of have that division where the two entities almost conflict. One of the reasons we're sitting here is the name, which I believed was repair, maintain, and sell. So you've kind of bridged that gap. But tell me, you know, what led to that bridging of that gap? And I think we touched on it yesterday. Maybe COVID was the catalyst for you to look to do more sales?
Yes, but I think I also alluded to you that the longevity of the company, as I really give the credit to the people that I work with on a daily basis, is that we saw that we were basically shouldering a lot of the responsibility of the dealers in the area. And I had said that a lot of them, because they focus so much primarily on sales, their infrastructure did not allow them to last very long. And so in order to please a customer who just bought a piece of equipment, they were losing money because they didn't have the service side. So they'd have to outsource their service. And upon doing that, they began to lose traction, and a lot of those dealers are not around. So I tried that. I wanted to be focused in service when I first began the company. And I really held really steadfast to that. And dealers would call me and ask for support, and I would support them, and I'd meet with all their salespeople and do the whole song and dance. But then something stopped. You know, once those dealers started falling out, and without, you know, throwing stones at any glass houses, other manufacturers were making it difficult on me because they weren't progressing in the service industry either.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about the financials. They weren't keeping up with the cost of living. They weren't, you know, they didn't look at it from a large scope. And so I said, oh, you know what? I've supported these dealers for so long. I have my clients depending on someone to be there for all three aspects. And so I said to the team, now's the time. Now's the time. And then again, pandemic kind of has that like line in the sand for me, is that some manufacturers became more reasonable to talk about RMS and being able to provide equipment for our customers. And honestly, the rest is history.
Yeah. Well, look, obviously we don't want to sort of talk about history too much, but talk to me about modern day. Modern day, you've got employees that have been with you for over 20 years.
Yes.
You're a family business. Kind of talk to me how it works maintaining people for that long. How you deal with people like little Wipey for over 20 years who was in the basement, and you know, how do you keep that going in the business? Like, how do you keep people to maintain in your business for that long?
That's a great question, Glenn. I think it comes down to when you're a business owner, and I mentioned this to you, is that when you get people who have similar goals, similar outlook on life, and then you bring them into the business, you share with them where you want to go as a business owner, but you never, and this is probably my personality come out, I don't know if you noticed that I don't say the terms, they work for me, they work with me.
Yeah.
So I try to emphasize that these are people. I try to dignify them as much as possible. You know, we come together as a team as much as we can. You probably see it on social media. We do the bowling and the other events just to keep the family atmosphere here. And, you know, I also think that what has drawn us closer together, and I mentioned this to you, is that when I go in the field, even though I'm there, I'll cut the boxes up. I'll take the trash out. We're there to, whatever it may be, an install, a move, repairing several pieces of equipment. We go in, there's one person in charge, whoever that may be. Steven mentioned his capes, whatever. They're generally short capes, but they're capes. But, you know, we go in and I'll say to Steven, hey, look, what are we doing here? What do you need me to do? And I think that, you know, that's probably not, you know, our friends at Tesla or Amazon, their ownership there looks at things differently. And granted, but here at RMS, it's all team, it's all family. That's why I take pride in the fact that the tenure here is so long, and even the new people recognize when they come on board, this is a real family. I mean, we're completing sentences for one another, and in Steve's case, he does all the talking for us. So, it's one of those things. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any one thing. I think it's over time in that respect for one another that grows. And yeah, I mean, for instance, in having a family, I had to step away for a while. So I had to be willing to give the keys to Emily and to Steven during those times and say, hey, I'm going to be away for a little while. Can you handle things for me? And I never sweated it.
Yeah. Now, one of the things, in my little business, I've always made an effort to make myself redundant. And people kind of question how that works, but it allows me to do other things that doesn't necessarily have me tied into the business, but it can also be hard because, there's this ego in you that says, I do everything best in my business. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like you've really been able to engage that type of philosophy as well as of letting go. Is that something that kind of has been a mindful thing, or is it just a natural thing for you to nurture them and then give them enough rope to hang themselves with?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that, because I don't think any business owner goes home at night and doesn't think, what's the next day going to bring? We're always thinking, okay, what's going to happen tomorrow, or whatever lasted from the day before that's still pressing. But I think you have to have confidence. I think that I've learned that, and I've even seen this in other people who have come, and they're not with us now, but they needed someone to completely direct every step. Mm. And that's draining for a business owner who has to wear many hats. I can't just, you've seen what my office looks like. I'm not sitting in there reading the paper or surfing the internet. I'm involved. And by being involved, I see the different pieces. But to your point, is like I try to show by example that, that here's a decision I have to make. And, take for instance, Emily, she came on board, we laughed about it, but I mean, she's been here so long that she's been here longer than she was alive in the sense of before. Yeah. So it's like, she eats and breathes RMS Fitness. And that's because of the consistency over the years of allowing her to make decisions. And look, we're not all going to make the right decisions. But what I do cherish is that they did make a decision and they thought this was the best decision for the company. And for any owner, that's the best you could ask for.
Absolutely. Well, Robert, obviously, 28 years, something's going right. I imagine some things that have gone wrong, but right. And you touched on it before that, you hope into the future to hand over maybe to Logan or to the other, your yes. daughter and the rest of the family. But, you've obviously changed from the meaning RMS to repair, maintain, sell. What's the next 5-10 years for the company look like?
That's a great question. And
do that sometimes.
Yeah, you do. I'd say you got me there. So I thought, if I sit down with Glenn today, what's he going to ask me? And that did cross my mind, the next 5 years. And it's interesting because we signed this building that we're in today that's going to last, the lease is 10 years. And I thought, when I look at myself from a mortality standpoint, it's like, how long can this guy last in the industry? How long can you carry a treadmill? But I think that what we have, and I've been kind of the motivational speaker guy that I love, I absorb all that stuff all the time. They talk about grit. It's that you look so far down the line. And it's like, you want RMS to be in this area, to have such a reputation that the name could be synonymous with, other names in the industry. We've made a footprint. When people see the name, they recognize the name. So I think in the next 5 years, what I'm looking for is, because the S is kind of the new ingredient to the to the third, or to the 3, is that we want to get as good with that as we did with the repair and the maintenance. So if I had to say, I want to be able to say that all three across the board have the same level of progression, output, same reputation together. So I don't want to look too far down the road, but in the next 5 years, that's what we need to focus on, is that all those who are dependent on us for repairs, when the equipment need comes, they'll have the same comfort level, the same, willingness to say, I hired you for this. Hey, let's talk about this. So that would be my goal for the next 5 years.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, you touched on before the next 5 or 10 years carrying a treadmill. You put me through my paces in the gym this morning. I don't think you'll have any problems carrying a treadmill, but equally, I think you've got a strong team around you that'll carry it for you.
Yeah.
So anything further you wanted to add?
No,
last minute pitches for RMS.
I thought about this, and I think Steve's going to probably do a lot of pitching later. But for me, it's been very enjoyable, because generally when we were talking about the trade shows and other industries, and you talk about egos. So I get to these trade shows, and it's like I'm in there with other owners, and the world of fitness is a business, and I understand that. But it's also, it's one of those things, is that if we don't treat this industry with a little more respect for one another, and a little more give and take, so to speak, even in my industry, where I told you, service-wise, bar none. But then I've seen in the sales world, it's like, if we keep treating this area of fitness where we're selling equipment at the rate that we're selling it and how we're selling it, the industry could really be hurting in 10 years from now, because the philosophy should be quite different. It should be, should take more pride in the industry, not so much the bottom line, but more pride into it, and really know that we have a really, health and wellness is a big industry to begin with, and then you get into other branches of it. But I really hope that the industry continues. I love the industry. I enjoy working out, as you saw this morning. That's what keeps us all moving. But to have the opportunity to then branch out and allow others through the things that I do to also enjoy the industry, well, that's something to really be proud of, and I'm looking forward to doing it until I can't.
Well, I reckon that's a pretty good way to wrap this up. But from one little bloke from Australia to a little bloke in Baltimore, thank you, Robert Decker.
Glenn, it's been a pleasure.
Been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for your time.
Absolutely, sir.